Do you like to just wind down after a long day and put on a psychological horror film? You know, the ones that are disturbing and unsettling, just so you can feel something? Because I sure do, and I do that a lot more than I should. ADHD kicked in. Sorry. Welcome. Today we're going to be doing the top 5 psychological horror films. For me, at least, these are my top 5. Like the last video, it's my top 5 for the top 5 horror films with curses. Now this is the psychological, and I believe, in my own opinion, that psychological horror films are probably one of the best horror genres out there. I mean, I love every single other horror genre, but I think psychological ones really, do something to me, if that makes sense. Like, they're the ones that actually scare me, the ones that make me think afterwards, the ones that make me unsettled. And psychological horror films come in all types of subgenres. There's body horror, there's supernatural psychological, there's cult psychological, and that's pretty much what this top 5 list that I have is, at least. And just as a disclaimer, again, this isn't my top 5 horror films of all time. When we get to Halloween, I'll drop a top 10 or maybe even top 15 horror films of all time. One psychological horror film, actually, that I think about it now, isn't on this top 5, but it is one of my favorite horror films. Excuse me, and I don't know why I did that. That sounded like I was about to cry. My favorite horror film is not on here. Some of these films are still up there for one of my favorite horror films, but they definitely aren't the top. Maybe? When we get to the top 10 horror films of all time, top 15, whatever, I'll make that judgment. But for now, we're going to do the psychological. And like I said, psychological is one of my favorites. It deals with uncertainty. It deals with character psychosis. It deals with character-driven psychological stories, ones that even have plot twists at the end. Is it all real? Is it not? Any movie that really just disturbs me, I think, qualifies as psychological. I mean, it's fucking up my brain, so... But without further ado, we will get started into this. And like I said, don't come at me with my list. Please and thank you. For the number 5 spot for our top 5, my top 5, our. Just a disclaimer, I'm not only picking movies that I only have on physical media, I just collect the ones that are my favorites, so it just happens to work out, guys. But number 5, we are going to put American Psycho. And actually, this is actually one of my favorite steelbook covers. Ooh. So spooky. American Psycho is definitely a top choice for me for psychological. It definitely doesn't fall into the normal psychological horror that we all think of. It's definitely, I guess it could lean more on the slasher side, but the story, the acting, the types of themes that the movie represents, I do think that those fall under psychological films. And the Christian Bale is just so good in this movie. This movie really, was one of those early movies that I would secretly watch on my laptop, and it was just one of those movies that just stuck with me, especially after the ending. It's definitely on the bottom part of the top 5 because it definitely doesn't quite grab, for me at least, the psychological elements as these next 4. But this one is definitely up there. Everyone in this is really good. Willem Dafoe was in this. So many good names. Jared Leto. Well, not a good name, but he's in there. He's still good in it, and I think this movie is just really, really good. This is the unrated version, so I'm not sure exactly what differs from the regular rated. I think there might be an extended-ish sex scene, I think, or something like that, and maybe more gore or blood. But other than that, I think this movie is really, really good. Kept me thinking afterwards, and that's going to be number 5. Number 4 is going to be a classic that we all know and love, and that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The Shining is one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick films. I think Eyes Wide Shut is definitely creeping up there. Now, if we had a regular psychological movie top 5, I think Eyes Wide Shut might be in there. But I think for horror standards, I think The Shining is well-deserved in this place. Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, great. I mean, there's nothing bad about this movie. I know a lot of people talk about how different it is from the book and how they don't like it because it's not the same as the book, and I don't care. I think it's still great. I think it is, so it's unnerving. It's not like a regular jump scare. If you've seen The Shining, if you haven't, I would go highly watch it, but I think there is enough like disturbing elements or unsettling elements in this movie that make up for that horror standard. There's not like jump scares, like, I mean, I guess there's ghouls in there, supernatural, but it's not like the normal horror film. But I think The Shining is still one of my favorite horror films, and I think it really just is a good psychological depth into Jack Torrance, the main character. So if you definitely haven't seen The Shining, I don't know what you're doing. It's a great family film for the wintertime. The Shining. The top 3 definitely might have some people crawl out of their skin. For me, top 3 is going to be something that recently came out, and it's actually the first Omen. Now, why the first Omen? Well, there are psychological elements throughout this movie. Obviously, it leans towards more of a supernatural religion kind of horror movie, but in all depths, it is psychological in its sense. And it's a prequel to the original Omen. Now, I haven't seen the Omen in years, but I do think, now this is a hot take, I think that the first Omen is scarier than the first Omen. But yeah, this movie was a surprise hit for me. I didn't think it was going to be that good, that, like, unnerving. There's definitely one scene in here that I always think about, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's a woman is lying on, like, a medical bed, and something reaches out from inside of her. If you know the scene of what I'm talking about, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This is really good. Really psychological, not really psychological, but in the sense of mental disturbance and like hallucinations and stuff like that. Religious cults. I mean, a lot of horror movies out there that do deal with religious cults are heavily psychological induced, and I do like that. And when a cult or like a religion is portrayed really good in a horror movie, it automatically boosts up points for me. So that's why I think the first Omen goes up there. Just for me, it was one of those recent movies where I just couldn't get out of my head. It was just such an interesting supernatural psychological way. And just the dread of the entire movie really just crept into me even after watching the movie. I think the first Omen is really good. And I think the first Omen is an underrated new decade of horror that just came out, and I think you should really go see it. I think it's really creepy. It's really disturbing. The first Omen, top 3. Now we're going to get into number 2. Number 2, I'm actually questioning myself after now looking at this top 5, but it's too late now. It's stuck with me. Whatever I say now is beholden onto the internet. So number 2 is going to be Infinity Pool. Now, I recently, about a year ago, got this movie. I saw it at a movie store that I went to go see, and it was on sale. It was the 4K uncut, so I was like, I'd never seen it before. I knew the synopsis from like IMDb, but I was like, oh, Mia Goth, Alexander Skarsgård. It's probably an okay horror film. Now, what I watched, especially with the uncut version, I need to go and just tell you right off the bat, I had to pause the movie after the first body horror scene. And it is a body horror because it's directed by Brandon Cronenberg. His dad, David Cronenberg, has made body horror after body horror, really like weird body horror. And this one is definitely one of the weirder ones for me, at least. Like I said, there is this one scene where I had to pause it, and I think I was stunned. The first like ever like body, I don't want to spoil it because if you're willing to watch this movie and to be surprised, let me tell you, my jaw was on the floor for the first like 5 minutes. Not the first 5 minutes, but the first 5 minutes of this first body horror scene. And I had to Google what the hell the uncut version is different from the regular rated version. And I will say that I think if you want the full fucked upness of this movie, you should see the uncut version. Mia Goth, Alex Skarsgård is really good in this. It'll take your breath away. Go into this with nothing, but go into it preparing to see body horror to the max. And it's definitely, for psychological reasons, it really like disturbed me. Even like the plot itself, the plot was so, again, I don't want to get rid of or get into like spoilers, but the plot itself is very psychological. This definitely is under the radar for a lot of people, and I think people should give this a try. It's definitely not the best psychological horror film, and I think actually probably The Shining is probably better in terms of like story and stuff like that. But if we're talking about like full-on psychological fuckery, this movie is by far higher than The Shining did for psychological reasons. So we're going to get into some honorable mentions before the number one. Hereditary is going to be an honorable mention. It would have been number one if this was my top overall horror films. Get Out, I would put as an honorable mention. I think Get Out would classify, but I see it as more as like a thriller. It's definitely in the horror sub-genre, but it's definitely more of a psychological thriller for me, Get Out. Even the movie Us by Jordan Peele and Nope. Most of his movies deal with like a psychological tendency, but I think those could be in their own like ranking or own class, and those are some more honorable mentions. I think we're ready to get to the number one spot, and the number one spot, people might roll their eyes, people might say, of course it's this movie, but for me, it's one of those movies that sticks with me, and it still sticks with me to the end of this day, and that movie is Midsommar. And I have the director's cut, of course. The director's cut, any like director or uncut for a psychological movie, even any horror movie or any movie in general, is usually not so-called better. But I say especially with these psychological movies, if you want the full like dread, full like psychological experience, I definitely would recommend doing like the uncut versions of the director's cut. But Midsommar is probably, for me at least, one of Ari Aster's last best films. I know, I was afraid I didn't like overall like hate it, but I didn't like love it. And then Eddington just came out. I haven't seen Eddington, but some people say it's better than Bao, some people say it's the same as Bao. So I know that they don't touch lengths with Hereditary and Midsommar, but Midsommar is just one of those movies, again, I still think about. Florence Pugh is practically amazing in this. Most horror movies with good psychological always tend, for me at least, to have better acting. And I mean, most of these movies, like I mentioned, do have better acting than most other psychological films, in my opinion at least, besides Hereditary. But it made me think about the ending a lot more than Hereditary's ending did. And I just think that overall it's really interesting cult psychological horror movie, and the cult side of it is really, really good. I think they took the religion cult aspect and did something really creepy with it, and it's just one of those movies, like I said, where I still think about, and it's just one of those movies where I'm like, damn, that's a fucked up movie. So that's my top 5 psychological horror films. If you like this, like the video. If you don't, still like the video. Subscribe if you're new, and if you're not new and this is your normal viewing hours, give a like and share. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.